What we're looking at in this segment is video editing, and this is arguably the most complex subject as far as the whole video project goes. And the biggest reason for that is because editing takes a little bit more skill and forethought and preparation, things like that. You know, you can just jump on a mic and start talking and, you know, you're good to go. It's helpful to have notes and things like that. But editing is one of the things that trips a lot of people up. And so editing doesn't have to be done if you don't want it to be done. It's something that can seriously suck a lot of time if you go through and you try to edit every little thing. So what we're going to look at is 3 basic rules to live by for video editing. And the first one is going to be keep it simple. You're not editing to add things to the video. You're editing to clean. So you're taking out, you know, your slip-ups where you restarted your word or your sentence or whatever. You're also taking out a few ums and ahs. It's okay to leave a few of those in there because usually what happens is we say right before we start speaking again. If it's an out in the middle of nowhere, then you know, that's okay to go ahead and delete. But if you're not careful, you'll delete an and it'll clip the first word so it won't sound natural. And unfortunately, this is kind of part of editing, is trying to, you know, keep it natural. You're not trying to make yourself speak over yourself. You know, you'll hear a lot of radio announcers, you know, those commercials that are only 29 seconds long. They got to hit that 29 seconds, and so they want to jam pack as much information. So what they'll do is they'll do the radio ad, and then they'll go back through and they'll run across their words. So they'll have, you know, one sentence, and then as soon as that sentence is finished, they'll go on to the next sentence. There won't be a breath, there won't be a pause or anything else like that. That's natural. That's what we naturally do when we speak. We require oxygen to breathe, and we take pauses to, you know, wrap our head around whatever we're going to talk about next. Those pauses are natural, and they also help your viewer, your listener, absorb some of that information at the same time you're taking that pause. So it kind of reinforces, you know, a lot of what you're speaking if you talk in a natural tone. Whenever you're doing video, you also don't want to falsetto your voice. You don't want to make it deeper. You don't want to make it higher. You want to just speak in the way that you speak. If you say y'all, I'm from Arkansas, I say y'all, and so I will say y'all. You know, I won't change the way I speak for, you know, a tutorial training, because that helps your audience as well. And it's also going to make it sound more natural. So essentially your voice, your speech, your picture, all that kind of stuff gets out of the way. The whole point of creating the video is to convey something, and usually it's training if you're doing a training. And so you want to get your voice and things like that out of the way so that you let the content shine. And then rule number 3 with, you know, video editing is less is more. While it's great to repeat yourself 3 times for people to understand, you know, that's great on webinars, you know, and that's something to live by and follow. But whenever people have the opportunity to go back and watch it numerous times, repeating everything 3 times is going to take a 3-minute video and make it a 9-minute video. If you already had a 10-minute video, it's going to make it into a 30-minute video by repeating everything 3 times. So while it's good to reinforce that, part of the idea with, you know, video editing and post-production is they can go back and they can watch that video again. You know, if they miss something, they can back it up, they can pause, they can do things like that. Now, if you're doing a sales video where you don't allow them to pause and fast forward and things like that, you can repeat the core ideas, you know, 3 times. And that will reinforce that idea into your audience. You know, your viewer doesn't want to sit through a 30-minute training session for just 5 minutes of content just because you are repeating yourself. Again, if it is, you know, content driven, they can go back and watch that. They can back it up. They can do the process while they are watching the video. So they can pause. They can do things like that. That will help you in the long run. You know, write down these 3 rules. Rule number 1, or take a screenshot, print it out, whatever works for you. But these 3 rules you want to keep in your head. Rule number 1, keep it simple. Rule number 2, keep it natural. Rule number 3, less is more. So as far as editing goes, we've covered webinars, screen recordings, studio recordings, and mobile recordings. And the process for editing all these different mediums is different. The idea is the same. Whenever you're editing a webinar just for a replay, you're not going to go through and take out all the ums and the ahs and things like that, because you want to keep that live feel. What you're editing on a webinar is you're just cutting off the beginning and the end. You want to start it clean. You want to grab their attention. So, whenever we do our webinars, we always, come on and say hi to the live audience, give, a few cool little tips or, whatever works for them, user interaction, things like that, things that don't make sense on a recording. And then we always have a moment of silence, or we always have a definite starting point. And so then, whenever we do the replay, that's where we start. And we, everybody comes on, we introduce ourselves, we talk about what we're going to talk, and then we get into the content. Now, whenever you get into a live training, you're going to have ums and you're going to have ahs and things like that. But for you to go through and edit that would take you way more time than what is worth for that replay. Now, if you're taking the webinar and cutting it into smaller bite-sized segments, for example, screen recording training, then it's helpful to do that. You can take that webinar that you just chop the front and the back off, all that silence, and then chop it up into smaller bits. That's where you can take the ums and the ahs. You can also, adjust where the timing is. So in the Q&A, if you forgot to mention something that you mentioned then, you can take that and put it back in the area where that training actually was in the presentation. Now that's a little bit more advanced, and I'm going to recommend that unless you know editing, I would not do that. I would just chop this into bits. I would, focus on getting through this as quickly as possible, because, doing that editing takes a mindset. There's just something about it that requires a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of know-how, that you could easily outsource easier than you learning the process. And so you'll find, a guy like me who does video, who knows that, and then they can go through and edit it. Now for screen recordings, those are short, they're sweet, and they're to the point. And so you want to edit according to that. A studio recording is a little bit more difficult to edit because, with a PowerPoint presentation, if I mess up and start over on a word, I don't have to cover that up. I can just cut that because the screen never changes. Whereas with a on-camera studio recording, my face is here. So if I messed up and did, and cut that out, then you could see the jump cut. And that's what we call, whenever you're watching a video and your head or whatever you're showing cuts from one frame to another frame that looks similar. Alright, so this is what a jump cut looks like, and I'll see if I can't mute this here so you can just hear my voice. But you can see her, and then it instantly cuts over, and it feels awkward. So that's kind of what a jump cut looks like. And so whenever you're editing, that is much more difficult to get around because that makes it feel awkward. So it's almost easier if you do shorter studio recordings and then edit them together or cover them with, a PowerPoint presentation or whatever it may be. You can also add cool little effects in there, but you kind of want to shy away from doing things like that. And then, mobile recordings, we already talked about editing those as far as, on the device itself. Whenever you take that mobile recording and you put it back onto the computer to do, a few more edits, or maybe you're adding it to, a screen recording or whatever it may be, the editing process is pretty much the same as the studio recording. Alright, so we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but as far as video editing for webinars go, you have the two different approaches that we talked about. You have the editing for replay, which is really just a conversion. You're just trimming the beginning and the end, the silence. You want it to start right off with, the presenter. And it's good for those who couldn't attend the live event. It doesn't require much time. It's designed to be a fast turnover, a fast turnaround. So, you have a page expiring in 5 days. You can go ahead and do that replay and have that replay up in 24 hours. Whereas taking the editing for training webinar editing approach, you're cutting that webinar into bite-sized chunks. And this is great for training webinars. You do a a 2-hour training webinar, it seems kind of a shame just to let that go out into the live audience. All those attendees get good quality training, but they may miss that, and so then they go back and they watch the replay. Well, if you took that, you could actually make that another separate product that you sell by chunking that huge video replay into smaller bite-sized chunks. And it does require more time, and you can do this very quickly. You can just go, right at the 7 or 8 minute mark and just cut every single one like that. Or you can have a video guy, or, you could even try doing it yourself, taking that 2-hour product and putting together, maybe 10 to 12 videos that cover different topics, and then they're branded to cover those different topics and things like that. We've done a lot of that here at JJ Fast. And so as far as video editing for webinars go, we looked at the 3 main options here: GoToWebinar, AnyMeeting, and Google Hangout. And you can kind of see the process here. As far as GoToWebinar goes, you record via the built-in tools, that start recording button on the administrative panel, and then you edit it via Microsoft Expression, essentially just cutting the beginning and the end. And we'll look at this here in just a second during a demo. You'll export via Microsoft Expression, then you'll convert via Handbrake, and you'll upload it to your publishing location, whether that be your own website, Amazon S3, YouTube, etc. As far as AnyMeeting goes, we looked at this before. You'll record via those built-in functions. You'll edit, which is just basic editing again, just starting and stopping, cutting off the ends. Then you'll publish via those built-in tools as well. And Google Hangout is the final one that we looked at. They offer the same functionality. You'll record via those built-in tools. You'll edit via YouTube's built-in tools. And the processing time on that is super fast. You don't have as much control over it as you do, GoToWebinar, but the turnaround is super fast because Google processes that quickly and easily. And then you'll edit via those YouTube functions before you make it go live, and then you'll publish it via YouTube. So as far as video editing programs go, looking at the Mac and looking at the Windows, I'll open each one of these up and kind of show you, what each one looks like, and they all have different price tags. And so that's why I tried to give you a couple of free options in here too. So you have ScreenFlow, which we've looked at before, and I'll go through some more of the editing functions. Then as far as iMovie, that is a program that ships on every Mac. It is designed for editing, mostly basic editing, but it does have a few advanced functions in there. Again, you want to kind of shy away from those. Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro, both of those are professional applications. They're going to be the ones that, unless you've already bought it because you're a video guy, I'm not going to recommend you buy it, because you can do just about everything you want with ScreenFlow or iMovie. But Adobe Premiere is kind of what the pros use. And then Windows virtualization for the Mac, I have a couple of different options there. One of them is actually free too. So you have that option. That's mainly for webinars. I recommended that you record and manage all your webinars in Windows. It seems to operate better. Granted, I operate it on a Mac and it's more stable, but if you run a clean Windows environment, it seems like Citrix puts more R&D into their Windows applications than they do Mac. I'm hoping eventually that'll catch up, but Mac seems very buggy right now. And then as far as Windows go, you have Microsoft Expression Encoder, which is free. You also have Camtasia, Active Presenter, and then again you also have Adobe Premiere that runs on both Windows and Mac. We'll kind of look at the editing functions of most of these. We've kind of already looked at Camtasia, Active Presenter, ScreenFlow, and iMovie, and we'll touch on those again. And I'll just kind of show you lightly what Adobe Premiere looks like. This isn't an advanced video editing course, so you're probably not going to have that application, but I'll kind of show you what it looks like anyway. We'll look at Windows virtualization as well. So that's what we'll do in the next video, is we will actually take a look at ScreenFlow on the Mac real quick, and I'll kind of run through some of the editing options.